Hello everybody, my name is Springs Rattling, and today we are doing a tier list for Orktober, ranking all of the Ork datasheets that are currently available in Warhammer 40k, excluding Legends stuff. So, we've got some pretty standard ranks here. This is going to be, sort of personal preference that appeals to my playstyle in a lot of ways, but also I will be trying to evaluate their own strengths. So here we have all the battle wagons got rolled into one datasheet after last edition, but this is the Bone Breaker, which is it's got the Deathrolla hard case cannon on top, and overall I'd say this is not how I would run a battle wagon. We are going to be ranking these battle wagons. Unless, is this the only battle wagon here? Because I know some of the tier lists split them up. Okay, so this is the battle wagon itself. It's just the picture is the Bone Breaker. I think the battle wagon is strong. It's really tough. For 160 points, you're getting a monstrously tough vehicle. And that has so much transport space. It's instrumental in a lot of delivering a lot of powerful units that the orcs have, even in their current state, which isn't necessarily top of the line, but they still have some muscle to give. Next up, we have Snagga. Now, Snagga are an interesting battle line choice, and I think is one of the best designed sort of dichotomies in all of 40k is the boys versus Snagga. These guys are more expensive. They're similar, if not a little more fragile for the cost, but they do hit a good bit harder, and they hit harder against vehicles, though they're worse on the objective game. I think these guys do have a very good place in the Orc Codex, and I think I'm going to put them in the biggest and the best, just because their muscle is really appreciated on the front lines. And they're, of course, battle line, they're OC2. They're still good on objectives. They just don't have quite the same objective rules that the standard boys have, which we will get to. Next up, we have the Beast Boss on Squigosaur. Now, the Beast Boss on Squigosaur is one of my favorite models, so I'm inclined to put it very high up. But in terms of overall strength, I think his melee is very good, unsurprisingly. His movement speed and Squighogs themselves are relatively strong. He's super tough. He gets them to combat quicker. He does have that free heroic intervention, which is all right. That is useful for them if they want to jump into combat with something. And of course, he is a pretty solid place for enhancements in Warhorde, getting Headwappa's Kill Choppa to get some really nasty anti-vehicle damage. I think I'm going to put this guy in strong. Part of that is personal preference. I love this guy. I think he's one of the best orc models around, and I think he is actually, he can really mess things up in close combat, as an orc should, and overall is pretty solid. And though I'd probably say that, Mazrog is probably a little bit better, though I don't think there's too much in it between the two. Obviously, the normal Beast Boss is cheaper, Mazrog is a little killier, and so on. Next up, we have the Beast Boss himself. Now, the Beast Boss is also, honestly, not too different from the Beast Boss on Squigosaur. He hits tanks pretty dang hard, and he already has devastating wounds, which is nice to have built in. He's got flexible melee, he's got his Choppa for dealing with infantry, and his Claw for dealing with the tougher stuff. And of course, he makes his squad hit more accurately, and Snagga in general are pretty strong, just melee-wise, and this guy just adds to that and helps them take down vehicles, and the Snagga give him those reroll hits, which is super useful when he's so consistent at wounding his intended targets. I am going to put this guy into biggest and the best, just because I think this combo is really solid. So here we have the Big Mech in Mega Armor, who has certainly seen a bit of a fall-off recently, unfortunately. As cool as the model is, he just doesn't really have much of a place, because Mega Nobz want to be with ghazghkull, and there's not really much of a point to run any Mega Nobz past that. I do think his durability buff is nice. A 4+ invul makes them pretty tough, but they'll need some sort of buff in the next data slate for this guy to be good. I'm going to unfortunately put him in bad choice. Now here we have the Big Mech with Shock Attack Gun. Now this guy has sort of had a sneaky, almost glow-up in a sense, which isn't unusual. You'll find this a lot in codexes. When they get nerfed, people will go over things they passed over before and realize there's a lot of use for these guys. And the thing with the Big Mech with Shock Attack Gun is if you run him with Ludas, it's a very cheap unit that hits enemies really hard in Dreadmob. And overall, his buff is very impactful. Sorry, I'm getting this backwards. His buff isn't super impactful. In fact, it completely overlaps with the Luda's innate special rule. but he gives them the mech keyword, and the shock attack gun is a genuinely threatening weapon. So these guys sat up in a building, excuse me, sat up in a building or something like that, and they can just light up the enemy with those def guns and the shock attack gun, and do a lot of damage with the find the goggles, because then people can't use cover to negate the low AP of the def guns. And overall, it's actually a really, really threatening thing. If you use bigger shells for bigger gits, they will be devastating vehicles very fast. So I think this guy, thank God, is actually a top-tier orc unit, which has been a long time since he has been, but he's such a cool model, and I'm glad to see him doing well. Now, here's another cool model, but one that, unfortunately, I don't really think has a place. The Big Mech with shock attack gun, or just the Big Mech, sorry, I'm so used to saying Big Mech with shock attack gun, because I've been playing orcs for so long, that just saying Big Mech is just a little weird. He's not what I would consider super versatile or really focused properly. He gives you the reroll ones to hit at range, which is nice for orcs because even how inaccurate they are. But his leader options aren't very interesting, and his shock boost ability isn't useful for the units he'd want to be buffing with that range special rule. He lets them reroll advances and they get to move through things. But units like Luda's mech guns don't really want to be, like charging into the front line. His own guns are kind of short range, and then his melee is interesting. The Drilla, for example, is really good at cracking vehicles, at least getting one save past a vehicle toughness profile. But a war boss does that for cheaper. Overall, I think this guy, unfortunately, does fall into bad choice. He's just not great. The Big Ed Boss Bunker, very orky, very cool looking, but it's a fortification. Tells you all you need to know. This is the Burnaboyz, if I'm not mistaken. I always do get the planes a little bit mixed up, but this is the Burnaboyz. Now it's a plane, so we're already off on a bad foot. But it's only going to get worse, because this thing only has really bad weaponry. It has one super shooter, which is a fine profile. But its bombing special rule is really hard to do. It doesn't do that much damage. It's very expensive. It's very fragile. Overall, it's just not what I would consider very strong. And it also is one of the more plain-looking jets, in my opinion, so we're going to put this in that choice. So this is the Boomdecka Snazwagon? No, this isn't the Boomdecka Snazwagon. This is... Oh, which one is this? It's the... I can't remember the name of this buggy. Oh, no. Jeez, what is this? I think it might be the Boomdecka Snazwagon, actually. Because this is the one with the flamethrower on top, right? I can just double check. No, this isn't the Boomdecka. Dang it, what is this thing? Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm failing as an orc. Custom Booster Blaster, right? Yeah, this is the Custom Booster Blaster. So, this one is a buggy. Very enlightening. For its points cost, it's not super durable. It's a lot flimsier than like a truck. Its special rule is merely okay. If you hit someone, they're -1 to hit, which can be useful against enemies like Tau. But it's situational where that's really particularly useful. Its own guns are merely okay. They're just orky kind of anti-space marine shooting. And its melee isn't actually particularly interesting either. It's just kind of a skirmishing unit that doesn't do too much. Its flamethrower attack is fine, though nothing special. I don't think this thing has much of a place. It definitely could maybe see some use in Cult of Speed, where it can get the Daka Storm, I guess. But there's definitely better targets for that. In general, I'd say this is a bad choice. Now we have Boss Snickrot. Now, Boss Snickrot is a lone operative. He can lead commandos, but I'd usually take him on his own. His melee is pretty good at killing most kinds of light and medium infantry. And his ability is actually pretty solid. He gets to run away instead of the usual runaway ability, which is like D6 inches. He just gets to redeploy anywhere on the field, deep strike effectively in your movement phase, which is useful if he's in a sticky situation or if he just needs to get somewhere to do a secondary. I'd say that Boss Snickrot is probably a situational pick. If you're running a lot of infantry, he's probably not the most useful because you'll already have a lot of board control. But for people that are running a lot of walkers or a lot of vehicles, he definitely does have his place, and I quite enjoy using him. Next up, we have Normal-Boyz. Now, Normal-Boyz are a great unit, one of my favorites. They're 85 points for the 10. They have a lot of melee damage for that cost. They're relatively tough, especially to small arms, bolters, lasguns. Really aren't super effective against them, and they're expensive. They're cheap enough that wasting heavy weapons on them is kind of a painful thing to do. And they have a great special rule. You'll generally want one of these guys to tag your home field and then let the Gretchin take care of it and have these guys run off. And if you can have these guys just bouncing around your objectives, whether it's jumping out of a truck or a battle wagon, they'll be really good. I think these guys are, interestingly enough, I think in this edition, boys win fights, Gretchin win games is still true, but boys also win games because sticky objectives is just so good. Especially if those Gretchin end up getting blasted off. It's a great symbiotic relationship, really. We're going to put these guys up in the top tier. I think boys are really good overall. Just fantastic. This is the Wazbomb Blastojet, Terror of 9th Edition. If you guys don't remember, this thing was a monster of a vehicle. It was truly horrifying what this thing could do last edition. But this edition, not so much. As fun as its name is, and it's got some impressive weaponry. Unfortunately, its biggest gun does hit on a 5+, which isn't great. Sorry, I just got distracted by something. Its special rule is kind of okay. When it's shooting at things on the ground, you reroll hit rolls of 1, but it's a jet. It can't have an invulnerable save, but that does not save it. This thing is really expensive for super flimsy. Like, legit one melt-a-gun is going to put this thing on death's door. It's really just not tough enough, and its damage is okay. It's good for a flyer, I suppose, but not much more than that. It can be accurate for orks, but this thing it's a plane. That should tell you all you need to know. So now we have Burnaboyz. Burnaboyz saw a lot of use in the early days of the edition, and not without reason. But I think they're not as useful. They're cheap. They're really cheap, actually. And they have good anti-horde, but the thing with orks is they tend to be alright at dealing with hordes anyways, just because their normal infantry hit so hard. I suppose you could do sort of a Burnaboyz kind of thing if you had like a truck loaded up with Burnaboyz. You could move that around the board and just absolutely melt infantry, which would be fun, but I think that they're not great. The reroll wounds can allow them to stack some saves, but without AP, it's questionable what they can really do. There's none of the detachments really super benefit them. Not that their melee damage is alright for orks, a little below average, honestly. And they're very inaccurate in melee, which you wouldn't expect from orks, but I think that they're a fine skirmishing unit, but nothing more than that, right? They're okay, but they're not going to do too much outside of look really cool, and, I mean, hey, that's a big part of it. Burnaboyz do look sick, and therefore, they're a good unit. That's a metric to go by. Here we have the Jet, which is sort of like the bog standard plane for these guys, and I think the Jet, out of all the planes, might be the best. It's very cheap as a flyer goes. It can have a lot of anti-infantry. You get in Cult of Speed, you get those extra sustained hits, you get those extras, you get extra lethal hits, whatever it may be. It can spit out a lot of firepower. I don't think it's like great or anything, but out of the planes, it's the best of a bad bunch. So let me reorder, because like the buggy isn't great, but it's better than the planes. So let's do this and put the Burnaboyz on last, because it's a bomber, and bombers are very weak. So we have the Def Dread. Now, I'm a pretty outspoken fan of Def Dreads. Def Dreads are very cool. I love all the customizability. I love the look of them. However, I do think Def Dreads are sort of a situational choice. I did do a video on this a while back that some of you may have seen. It was a very experimental video design-wise, but it was covering Def Dreads as shooting turrets. And I'm going to stand by what I said in that video, that a Def Dread with 4 custom Mega Blastas is a serious threat to just about anything in the game. Just because it has that nice quality and quantity of shots, it can really put the hurt on. And with a mech in tow, it really does become, honestly, terrifying. in Dread Mob, where it can get that +1 to wound and +1 damage, which will just annihilate things, though it does have the very orky trait of being extremely likely to immediately blow itself up afterwards. Overall, I think this guy is a situational choice. If you're running Dread Mob and you've got a mech, this guy is honestly probably one of the best firepower units in all of Codex Orks. I think I'm going to put him at the top of situational, because there's places where he's useful, but outside of that, his melee's good. Death Dreads always hit very hard, but he's sort of outside of that. His special rule is really not good. But I mean, I have a soft spot for it. If this was just my personal preference, I mean, easily one of my favorite models. But we're going off of unit strength, which is temporary. Remember, that is the main thing to remember about 40k. Rules are temporary, models are forever. So next up we have, what is this? This is the Deathkiller Wartrike, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Deathkiller Wartrike, sort of the modern. When did this guy come out? 6th edition? Regardless. The Deathkiller Wartrike is sort of your mounted war boss. He can lead war bikers. He does have the standard +1 to hit roll. He does have that auto 6 advance, which is useful in the turn of the wall. In terms of toughness, it's not great, but he is a character, so he's going to have his bodyguard of bikers with him. I think his shooting power is actually not too bad. If he gets that Melta shot through, he's surprisingly deadly with that. And his melee is good, not standout for a war boss, though. Overall, I think he's all right. He's definitely not bad, and I guess that would put him in situational, right? If you're running Cult of Speed, he's kind of a necessity. He makes war bikers, a little bit better. He has his uses, right? But it's just, it's Cult of Speed. It is what it is. I'm gonna put him in situational. I think overall he's okay though. Next up we have Deffkoptas. Now Deffkoptas, after their long-awaited time as a really ugly metal model, made their grand return last edition. I think Deffkoptas work all right as a sort of skirmishing deep strike unit, and their damage isn't anything stand out in any specific way. But I mean, they're fast. They're really not that tough, but they're fast. I'll give them that. They're okay on objectives. Their melee's okay. It's good at clearing out hordes. And you get 3, rocket launches, which are always solid. And these ones are even twin-linked. There's definitely worse you could do out there. They're definitely not as good as Stormboyz. I don't know. I feel like we need an extra tier between, situationally strong and bad choice. So we're going to add one. We're going to... Whoa, what the heck? Oh, I hit the arrow. We're going to make one. We're going to call this media... Oh, what just happened? What is happening? I feel like I'm having a stroke. Add row below. We're going to call this row... We're going to call this row mediocre. So this is units that aren't bad, but they're not really stand out in any particular way. I am going to leave the Deffkiller in situational just because you're really going to want to be running him in Cult of Speed for some of those enhancements. But these guys are in mediocre. I love Deffkoptas, even though my models, I think, all have their blades broken off. They're just mediocre. Now, Flashgits. Flashgits were a hero in the Index. However, with the departure of Captain Badruck, when his resin model was finally put to rest, they definitely seem to have kind of fallen off, but they are still very effective infantry killers, and especially at close range. Jumping out of a truck, for example, they still have, sort of knob level melee with choppas, of course, so no damage too. But these guys really are savage infantry hunters. Well, they probably won't be up close, they can do a lot of damage, even to something like Terminators. They're not going to be doing it in melee, of course, with their snaz guns is what I mean. And if you do have the chance for them to sit still, they will do a lot more damage. These guys, I think, are the definition of a situational unit, where Flashgits have a good blend of melee and shooting, but they're only really effective against infantry, and the lethal hits turn does let them punch up with the ammo runt. And they have their place, right? Honestly, I think I could bump the Flashgits up to strong, right? Because a unit of these guys will solve... Is there a lot of guardsmen in your way? Is there a lot of Gretchin in your way? Is there a lot of normal Space Marines in your way? These guys will, annihilate one of them in shooting and then charge in to do a lot of damage there as well, or a good amount of damage. I think that earns them at least strong. Now we have the biggest orc around, ghazghkull thraka. Now ghazghkull is probably the best data sheet in the Codex. All things considered, his melee is apocalyptic. Truly, he is just such a melt machine. Once this guy gets into melee, he can just grab a tank and make it explode instantly. And once you add on his +1 to hit and wound, he's hitting on 2s, he's wounding everything in the game on 2s, and he's damage 4 with, 3 AP? And he also has a great infantry killing profile. There's really not a lot that can slow ghazghkull down. The lethal hits from his from Makari's banner and the 5+ criticals is super useful in Warhorde, especially with something like Unbridled Carnage. Not Unbridled Carnage, sorry, that's old rules leaking in. But it's overall super useful in Warhorde to get those sustained hits on a 5+, and then with the +1 to hit and wound, he 1 rounds a night, no problem with his Meganob bodyguard, very easily. Next up, we have the Gorkanaut. So the Gorkanaut, I think, is at the very least an interesting option in something like Cult of Speed. Or not Cult of Speed, sorry, Dread Mob, where he can get those interesting buffs from a mech, and he does have, lethal hits, sustained hits, extra AP, and he's a great target for bigger shells for bigger gets, because then he gets damage 2 on that 30-shot Mega Shooter. Excuse me. His melee, of course, hits really hard at strength 18, AP 3, and damage 6. Though he might be a little high investment, and his shooting isn't super general purpose, though his melee is. I think he does end up falling, unfortunately, into, I think I can give the Gorkanaut situational. The Gorkanaut, he's decently tough, he's got a lot of wounds, his save's not too bad, he's going to have a mech tailing behind him to give him healing. He does have that transport capacity, which is useful, because you could have a unit of boys jump out to take an objective, or just act as almost a screen in case something like, what's a good melee unit to think of? A squad of Deathwing Knights are about to get into combat. You can disgorge your belly full of orc boys to then put a big screen between you and them, so this guy can continue to shoot at things without the risk of being blown up. I think he does fall into situational, because in Dreadmaw he has his place, even if it's not standout or if it's not what I would first pick. I think he's teetering between mediocre and situational, but I'm definitely putting him in situational. And also, the Morkanaut is just cool. It's piloted by an outcast Nob, it's got a big chain gun, it's got a big claw, it's orky as anything, and even if it's not the strongest, you have my respect for running a Morkanaut. Next up, Gretchin. Of course, the old adage is always true. Boys win fights, Gretchin wins games. Gretchin are in S tier. For 40 points, you get the 11 bodies. You're going to need at least 11 shots to kill all of them, which is quite a bit of, you're going to have to dedicate at least some shooting to them. And then, even if you do, you're just killing a bunch of goblins that weren't going to do any damage anyways. But they are good on objectives. They get you those command points. They stay on objectives. They're very small. They're cheap as anything. Let me clear my throat. Sorry, I have a frog in my throat. Frog cleared. Okay. So where were we? Oh yes, Gretchin. Gretchin have that great blend of lots of models for dirt cheap that do good on objectives. Fantastic models. Definitely some of the best in the Codex. I know a lot of armies would kill to have Gretchin in their armies, which is funny because they're just such a diminutive unit. Next up we have the Kill Rig. Now, the Kill Rig, I think, is unfortunately completely overshadowed, this isn't the Hunter Rig, sorry. The Hunter Rig is completely overshadowed by the Kill Rig, which is not exactly a great place to be in. It's got similar melee. It's got a little bit more transport capacity, so if you're running a big unit, I don't think it's a bad choice. It is pretty dang tough in itself and in, what's it called? Oh, I can't remember the name of it. The Big Hunt. If you're running a huge unit of Beast Snagga this is probably your best bet, though you could, of course, just use a battle wagon, which would be very similar and a little tougher. Though it's just let down by the fact the Hunter Rig exists, which is a much better data sheet for several reasons. The Hunter Rig, of course, has its crazy psychic shooting that's very weirdly the kill rig is just an overall better data sheet in my opinion. Even though the hunter rig does have that, its special rule is merely okay in my opinion. Getting +1 attack for the boys in there is interesting, but that's definitely not where you're going to be getting most of your value out of this thing. And the kill rig has, of course, the Whir Tower, which does a lot of damage and is weirdly good on Overwatch. And overall, it's just a much better data sheet. I'm even going to put him in mediocre. I don't think he's bad, but as I mentioned, he's overshadowed by the hunter rig. Or the kill rig. Sorry, why are these names so similar? So next up we have Killicans. Now I just did my video on Killicans, and I quite enjoy Killicans. They're relatively cheap, they've got a lot of wounds. They're tough enough against like small and medium arms, though things like plasma guns will still give them trouble. Their rocket launches are nice and accurate, their melee damage isn't too bad either. I think they work as sort of a tough midline fighter, and even though plasma guns are effective against them, since they have 5 wounds, it's going to take 3 plasma shots to take them down. Which is, that's a decent amount of firepower out of a unit, just to take down one model in the squad. They're good on objectives, they've got good shooting, they're one of the better shooting units in the Codex, though I still think they're probably more in the situational tier. If you're running Dread Mob, I would run some Killicans as powerful frontline fighters, but outside of that, you could probably leave them at home. Speaking of, we have the Kill Rig. Kill Rig is very solid. It lets you to give a unit +1 strength when they get out, or even lethal hits if you're really lucky. It's got very similar melee to the Hunter Rig. Its shooting is better because it has the Whir Tower, which is just really solid. It lets you transport a unit of Beast Snaggaboyz and Beast Boss. Overall, I think it's a great unit. I think I'm going to put it in strong. I just don't think it quite has the chops to make it into like every list, but it does have its place if you're using Beast Snaggaboyz, and especially in the Big Hunt, of course, because it has all those buffs against vehicles, and Beast Snaggaboyz are at their best there. Next up, we have Commandos. I think Commandos are pretty similar to their boss, Snickrot, unsurprisingly. Commandos have their place. They're expensive. They're very expensive, but getting that board control early is powerful. And having boys in the midfield is just pretty solid in general. Their melee damage isn't too bad because they've got the Power Claw, they've got a bunch of Choppas, they have the Breacher Ram. And they even aren't too, like, they're pretty tough in some regards, right? I'm not saying that individually, but they can be surprisingly tough because you can let loose the Distraction Grot to give them that invulnerable save, which is a solid buff against AP. And then, of course, you have your Bomb Squigs, which is just a nice punch against anything if you just need to finish something off. Though I do think they end up more so in the situational tier than anywhere else, just because they're so expensive, and they're a big unit, so they could get screened out by other infiltrators. This is the Poomdeka Snazwagon, is that what it is? Right, the one with the mech special on it. I like that name for a weapon. Though I don't think it's very good. The mech special is merely an okay anti-infantry gun. Its special rule is kind of weird. You need to get really close to enemies to get -1 to hit, but close range firepower will destroy this thing in like one failed save, which its save isn't very good. Its toughness isn't great. Its melee is merely like suffices. It's nothing special. This guy sucks, unfortunately. I hate to say it. Ludas. Now we went over Ludas in the Big Mech with Shock Attack Gun section, and I think because of that, they definitely are either strong or they're in the best tier list. I think they probably do end up more so on the best, just because a unit of them with this, with the Shock Attack Gun mech is so dangerous in Dread Mob that they do deserve to be up there because of how strong they are. Maybe I could bump them down to strong, but I think that just on the whole, if they're really that, like, they're our staple unit in Dread Mob, I think they deserve to be up there, right? And I know you could say, well, what about the buggies? The thing with the buggies is, like, they're a core unit in Speed Freaks, or Cult of Speed, but they suck. And they're not much better in Cult of Speed. It's like they really don't get that much there outside of the stratagems, and they're all kind of low damage anyways, which isn't great. Yeah, overall, like I think the big mech with the Ludas is a much stronger thing than the buggies tend to be, with maybe the exception of one coming up here. Next up, we have Mega Nobz. Now, Mega Nobz are this is tough because I just gave the Ludas their big placement, but I think I can cut it with the Ludas because even without the big mech, they're so cheap that, I mean, just orcs with guns just to sit there and kill some infantry for, what is it, 50 points? Like, that's just a good deal in general. So I think I can put them up there. Mega Nobz are similar, though, where they want to be with ghazghkull. But without that, they are too expensive and not durable enough to be worth it. I think these guys do fall more so into mediocre, though I'll give them the top end of mediocre because with ghazghkull they're so good, but that is ghazghkull doing the work, not the Mega Nobz. Even though the Mega Nobz do really appreciate the buffs, and if they get a buff either going down in points or going back to their old Feel No Pain, they will be apocalyptic again. Have no doubt in your mind that they will be apocalyptic again. In terms of our next option, we have the Megatrack Scrapjet, which is, I think, probably the best of the buggies, if I'm not mistaken. It has a good amount of shooting. It's got a couple big shooters. It's got those missiles, which all do damage 3. And while it's not super accurate, it's still the damage 3 firing, and they have blast. You're going to be doing at least a little bit of damage with them. At most things will take a bit of damage. He has his mortal wounds on the charge. Not a huge amount of mortal wounds, but mortal wounds on the charge can be good to finish off a unit. And then his own melee is not as dangerous as it's been in the past, but it's still a solid bit of a melee. But it's weirdly more of a shooting buggy. I think I'm going to put it in situational. If you're going to run a buggy, probably run this one. That's sort of my thoughts on it. Next up, we have the mech guns. Now, the mech guns have sort of been on and off in this edition, and I think their updates have made them, I don't know if I want to say better or at least more balanced, I'll say. Well, most of the time, you just run custom mega cannons, right? I think, weirdly, bubble chuckas have come into their own, just because, well, they're the best anti-tank weapon that the mech guns can carry if you get lucky with their rolls. And with a couple of mech guns, you probably are, because that top profile is pretty damaging. But overall, their defense isn't great, is what I would call it. And their shooting damage is still just kind of okay. The custom mega cannon only being AP1 really hurts, and it's hazardous, which isn't great for a unit that already isn't very durable. Though I think on the whole, it's just like, it's firepower, right? And it'll do damage to most things in the game, but it isn't. I don't think it's quite strong because it's not an ace at its job. Like the flash gits are an ace at dealing with infantry. The mech guns aren't an ace at dealing with vehicles. There's definitely better things to deal with vehicles, whether it be beast snaggas. So I think that earns it more of a sort of mid-situational tier. You're not going to be hurt by having some mech guns to chip in, but they're not, don't rely only on mech guns for your anti-tank damage. Now, next up, we have the epitome of a situational unit, the mech. The mech gives you +1 to hit, and heals your vehicles, which makes orcs a lot more accurate. It's a big, 50% damage buff, because you're hitting 50% more. He gets his loan up. Healing orc vehicles is useful because orc vehicles tend to be pretty tough, and he's instrumental in things like the Death Dread Death Laser combo, which is definitely very funny, I will say. And I think does earn him. I'm going to put him right next to the Death Dread, because this guy's situational. If you're running some of the big walkers, he's definitely worth it. Let me buff this guy up a bit. I think that the Killacan's a lot better than a lot of these units. Here we have the Gorkanaut. Now, the Gorkanaut is interesting, is how I would describe the Gorkanaut, because it trades off the massive melee of the Morkanaut for more powerful shooting, but like quotations on that. Its highest strength is still only 9, and that's not. Oh, sorry. No, it's not. What am I talking about? I was thinking of Morkanaut, not Gorkanaut. What am I talking about? Morkanaut, right? It trades off the melee damage. Not that its melee damage isn't still insane, for more guns. And its guns are more powerful, but not quite as powerful as I'd really like. It still has its highest strength is only 10, which I think is what holds it back. It's going to be very, very devastating to light vehicles. That big Zappa cannon on its arm is really, like, you point that at a rhino or something, it's going pop. It's tougher than the Morkanaut thanks to it's got a 5+ invulnerable save, and in the Wa it is very accurate. Though that does have, because something this big, I think just justifying a mech to give it +1 to hit and heals is more than worth it. And that's what I think really sort of bones the Morkanaut, right? Is its shooting damage is good, but like it's not going to be destroying land raiders or knights, which is where I think it really needs to be at almost 300 points. It's just, I think this one unfortunately falls into mediocre. It's still a good choice for, Dread Mob to get the +1 to hit and wound. Because then you're getting the extra damage, and it's going to be doing more to tougher vehicles. But the Morkanaut itself actually isn't too bad against those vehicles, while it's going to suffer a little bit against toughness 12 things. With +1 to wound and +1 damage, the Morkanaut's going to be doing a lot of damage to anything in the game. That's where, or the Gorkanauts, God, Gork and Mork. Get some unique names, would you? No, I'm just kidding. And its melee, the Morkanaut's melee is a lot worse than the Gorkanauts. It's got less attacks. It's got, overall, what is it? It's less attacks, and that's the main thing, right? Is it's just not hitting as many times. And with that big swingy melee profile, you do want to be hitting a good few times. So overall, I think it falls into mediocre. Now we have Mozrog. Now Mozrog Scragbad is quite a storied unit. He was good last edition, and he's good this edition. He's got his big chompa, but it does have that. His abilities are interesting, I would say. He's got his fights and death, which is useful for Squighog boys because you only have so many of them. So if you get them to fight before they die, that is very useful. Though they usually will be getting the jump on enemies. And then he does have his +1 damage ability, which is definitely pretty big. It will make him quite vicious against vehicles. He is an Epicure, so he can't have enhancements. And for the price increase, I think he's a fine upgrade. His melee's a little better. His special rules, actually, I think it sort of balances out between this guy and the boss on Squigosaur. Because the boss on Squigosaur will get you to melee faster, and is obviously 30 points cheaper. But I think Mozrog, I'm going to put him right next to the normal Beast Boss. I think these two are very similar. It's very similar to Beast Snagga Boys and Boys. If you just need to get the job done, the Beast Boss will do it. If you want to do a little bit more damage, upgrade to the Beast Boss, or upgrade to the Beast Snagga Boys, or upgrade to Mozrog. You get what I mean. Next up, we have Nobz. Now, Nobz have been the powerhouse of the Codex, I think pretty much for the entire edition. With their Power Claws and with a War Boss, they're going to hit really hard. They're not tough at all, though. While they are somewhat resilient to things like autocannons, since the -1 to wound, they're just not tough. Like, that's the long and the short of it. They're expensive as Space Marines. They've got a bad save. And the -1 to wound only goes so far, because usually with -1 to wound, it's more impactful to lower your toughness. And these guys are toughness 6? And that means that a lot of things that are targeting them are still going to tear through them pretty fast. But that being said, if you've seen Nobz in melee with a War Boss, you know how much damage these things do. Like, this thing really, they do not play. With their Power Claws and with a War Boss in tow in the Wa, I don't think I've seen anything survive a round of combat with that. Very, very powerful. We're putting them in We're putting them in the best tier. We're going to put them right behind we're going to put them in the upper echelons, right? Next we have the Pain Boy. Now the Pain Boy gives you a Feel No Pain. The Grunt Orderly lets you restore some models. His Urdy Syringe, I think, is kind of slept on almost. If Eldar or Sisters are getting really prevalent in your local meta, a Pain Boy is kind of the solution to that, right? Put this guy in a truck with some boys, charge into a unit of 1 wound infantry, roll a 4+ on the wound, d6 mortal wounds. You just killed d6 models. Less useful against the likes of Space Marines, but it's definitely useful against all infantry, and is weirdly good against Terminators since mortal wounds are so good at killing them. Though I think the rest of him is is just kind of okay. The restoring health is useful, and the feel no pain is good. He mainly sees use in Green Tide, where restoring models can be really big, because you can use this guy and then use the stratagem to get 2d3 plus 2 models back, which is a good chunk of your models back and get you over 10 models again. And in general, he sees use there, but I think that does sort of put him into situational alongside the mech, where he's good in some detachments, but not so good in others. Next up, we have the Pain Boss. Now, Pain Boss, very cool model. His fluff is pretty cool, though he's not really well represented on the table in that regard. Still gives him the feel no pain, and he can heal, but only like enemy heal friendly characters. And he does lack the Urdy Syringe, which I think is one of the better things of the normal Pain Boy. Though, of course, he still has the Grot Orderly, so he can still restore D3 models. But I just think he's not great. I guess if you wanted to run a second unit... Wait, actually, I'm not even sure if you could do that with him. Because Beast Snagga boys don't have the ability to be led by 2 models, which I think puts him into bad choice. Because if you're bringing him, you're not bringing a Beast Boss, and a Beast Boss is way better than this guy, bar none. Yeah, we're going to put him in bad choice, even though he's a really cool model. I like his metal head. I think it's cool. Rocket Truck Squig Buggy is artillery. Artillery got big nerfs in the last Balanced Data slate. Though, weirdly enough, didn't really affect orks, as their artillery already only hit on 5s. But the damage is pitiful. It basically is only good against light infantry, which there's much better units to do it. This thing's expensive, it's fragile. Its artillery is decently long range, but not great. And the movement debuff is only situationally good. And then you have, of course, the Squig Mine is some okay damage, but this thing is just not good. It just isn't, I'm afraid. And then we have the Shock Jump Dragster Jet. The Shock Jump, I think, is much better than most of the other buggies. Even outside of Speed Freaks, just because it has that repositioning ability. It's not very tough. It does have a little better damage. It's very swingy. If you get any of those hits is the main thing. But if you do, it is at least going to do a lot of damage. It's fast. Its melee is still mediocre. But the repositioning is the main thing. I think it has some use there. And obviously in Cult of Speed, it's probably the only other buggy I would use. Getting a sustained hit on its shock rifle, which is actually like super accurate for orks. It hits on 3s, which is very unusual, and it's a sniper weapon. But it's also strength 8, AP2, D6 plus 1. There's a good chance that can do some damage to just about anything. I like the shock jump, but I do think it still goes into situational, probably alongside the Megatrack Scrapjet. I don't think it's anything great, but I think if you need a repositioning unit and you don't want to use Snickrot, or you've already got Snickrot, this guy does the job well enough. He can snipe a character, maybe. He's very good at bullying light characters, at least. For fighting guard, this guy could definitely have a lot of use. But in terms of buggies go, it's definitely one of the better ones. Next up, we have Squighog Boys. Squighog Boys, I think, go right alongside their bosses. They're strong. They're good at taking down vehicles. They're somewhat tough. They're nothing standout, so to say. But, I mean, they've got a good amount of wounds. They've got solid toughness. They're very hard to slow down, because you can't slow them down. It has the Bomb Squig, which helps it take down those vehicles. And overall, its melee damage is very good against vehicles, and also normal infantry, weirdly enough. It's got that lance, so with strength 5, you're going to be wounding most infantry on 2s. And overall, it's just really, really solid. I love Squighog Boys. I think they're sick. Next up, we have the Stompa, the 800-point meme unit. That is, I believe, actually saw a little bit of tournament success around like 5 months ago. And I mean, I suppose there is something to be said that a Stompa against certain armies will just be unstoppable. Once you have this guy, you give him +1 to hit. This guy's got, 6 guns? And all of them are really powerful. Once this guy gets going, he really can, if he full open fires, he's going to be doing a lot of damage. Like, that is the long and the short of it. You are going to feel it. And then, of course, if he gets into melee, he has damage 10 melee at strength 24, so things like knights will really suffer if they get into melee with this guy. But, of course, its special rules are pretty bad. The +1 to battle shock tests is not useful. Stomping forward lets it just move over certain things. It can transport ghazghkull, so I suppose if you really wanted to go for an insane build, bring a Stompa, put ghazghkull in it with his Mega Nobz, bring a mech, and then that's a little over half your army right there. All contained in one big walking trash can. Now, I love the Stompa. I think every orc player deep in their heart loves the Stompa and wishes they could use it. Just because it's such a silly unit, and it's so orky. It's ginormous. It towers over knights. It's the size of a titan. It's just such a cool model, but unfortunately, I have to be realistic. It's a bad choice. I'm going to get to the top of bad choice, just because if you bring a Stompa, anyone you play against is going to be like, you're a cool guy. If you bring a Stompa, you're a cool guy. That's the way Stompas work. Next up, we have the Stormboyz. Stormboyz are going right up here. Very similar to Gretchin. They're very good for winning games. They have that deep strike. They have fast movement. They've got a little bit of melee. They're good at bullying infantry. They're not too expensive. Just having a squad or two of Stormboyz dropping around and rocketing about is very good. Like, there's nothing more to say. Just very good. Oh boy, Tank Busters, the last living relic of resin in the orcs. Because I believe the Weird Boy is still metal. So Tank Busters are awful, abominable. They're, 110 points for 5 orcs. You get 3 rocket launches, which are really good melee, or really good weapon profiles. But then you get the Tank Hammer, which is liable to blow its user up sometimes. And then you get the rocket pistols, which really aren't very good. And they're, of course, just standard orcs, so they will die to a stiff breeze. They get a few bomb squigs, which is nice. But this is probably the worst data sheet in the entire codex. This thing is awful. Also, I realized, this is not the Wazbomb Blastojet. How did I not realize that? That is the Blitza Bomber. Regardless, my point still stands. Truck. Truck is truck. Trucks are good and will always be good because they are cheap and they are fast and they are good for moving your boys around. Nothing more to say. Really good also with, who's his name? The crazy-looking Zogrod Snagga. Because then you can have a scouting truck, which is very tough and very good to put in the midfield. War Bikers. Now, War Bikers are not the beasts they were last edition, where if they got into rapid-fire range, they would just simply annihilate things. But they still get that extra AP, which is nice. They have assault, so they're free to advance all the time. They've got pretty standard melee weapons. Of course, always bring the chopper, no doubt about it. There's no point in bringing the sluggers. And they're sort of competing with Stormboyz. They're fast. They've got a little bit of OC. Their models are nightmares to put together, by the way. And in general, they sort of have that, that they're fast moving compared to most bikers. They actually have good melee damage, but they're not going to be winning any wars in raw damage output. Though they are quite good at bullying units smarter than them. So if you want them on the flanks, I think they're fine there. Though I do think overall, I mean, they're not very tough. I'm going to put them at the top end of mediocre. They probably could go into situational because if you're running speed freaks, you're probably going to be running some of these guys. So next up, we have the War Boss in Mega Armor, who definitely did get a nice upgrade in the move to the Codex. Great model, one of the best models I've ever painted, actually, like paint job-wise. He gives them that +1 to hit, which is good for Mega Nobz, because they're pretty inaccurate in melee. And he has a damage 3 melee weapon in the wall. It's solid, but the thing is, Mega Nobz themselves aren't solid, so that does kind of beat him down into mediocre. Because I don't think he's as bad as, well, no. I think I'm going to put him next to the Big Mech in Mega Armor, right? Because, like, the Big Mech in Mega Armor, he's got the guns, but Mega Nobz are going to be running their kill saws. Well, no, because I think that does give the War Boss some extra points, because he plays more with Mega Nobz how they want to be played with. And since Mega Nobz aren't tough anymore, there's really no point in giving them that invulnerable, because, well, the invulnerable isn't going to make them any tougher, because they're still pretty fragile for Terminator equivalents. Next up, War Boss. War Boss, my beloved, one of the first models I painted, and one of the, probably, like, in terms of pound for pound, probably the fightiest character in the game. This guy's only 65 points, and he is apocalyptic in the wall. Of course, make sure you get him out of your transport before you call the wall. But once you do call the wall, he's at 9 attacks. Oh, at strength, was it strength 12 or something like that? I'll pull it up just to make sure I'm not misrepresenting anything. But the war boss in the wall is just apocalyptic with how much damage he does. Yeah, he's at 9 attacks at strength 11. He's going to be just really messing things up. I run a war boss with Nobz in basically every list I run, and each time they get into melee with something, they kill it, almost without fail. I don't think I've seen them bounce quite yet. They rip down knights, they rip down elite enemies. There's really, like, for the points, what is it, 275 points for a unit of them? They're going to kill most things in the game very efficiently, and even if they don't, they will leave units on their last legs. The really thing that can only slow them down is, like, huge units of Terminators, so I suppose keep that in mind. Wazbomb Blasted Jet, my favorite plane. It's got its big shooty guns. It's got its force field. It's a little more accurate because it's piloted by a mechanized Gretchin, but it's still pretty awful. This thing will die to a stiff breeze. Super expensive, very fragile, really not worth using. I've given my piece on planes. There's nothing more to say. Next up, we have the Weird Boy, the last remaining metal model in the range, as far as I know. Very ugly model at that, I will say. I made my own. The Weird Boy can only lead boys, fittingly enough, I suppose, given the name. And his buff is letting you effectively deep strike every turn, which I think is solid enough. It's another option for repositioning. Useful in the end game, though he doesn't really have too much damage. His staff isn't bad, but it's low AP and only damage D3. He does have his Ed Banger weapon, which is very funny, I will say. Just the chance to absolutely like snipe out a Space Marine or something with a damage, with a huge damage headbanger. Though, of course, there is also the chance he explodes. And, of course, the jump can't fail, which is definitely not something you want to see because you want to be jumping behind those Tau lines, Mr. Bond. That's an old callback meme. I'm not sure how many of you will get that. Then we have, overall, it's all right. He's the same. I think the biggest thing that holds this guy back is his points cost because for 65 points, you could get Mr. Apocalypse himself, the war boss. So, yeah, overall, situational. I don't think he's bad, but he's not as good as Snickrot, that's for sure. He's definitely better than the Buggies. I'll put him behind the Morkanaut. Let's put him there, because the Morkanaut has more use as a linchpin unit. Next up, we have the Warboy, so the Who's'em what's its Snagga Psyker. Right, this guy comes from the Kill Rig, and I think it's a similar story to the Weird Boy, really. He doesn't have the jump, but he has pretty similar shooting. He gets the extra attacks when he's shooting. He gets a lot of extra shots when he's leading a unit. But also, again, same thing, hazardous. And his special rule is not very good. He just gives you a battle shock test at -2, which -2 battle shock test can make that more effective. But orcs aren't like Chaos Knights that feast off of enemies being battle shocked in any detachment. I suppose there's... Well, no, because a lot of them, I believe in Bully Boys, you force people to take Desperate Escape anyways, which isn't particularly useful, because if they're already battle shocked, that doesn't change anything. His melee's bad. I will give him that. I think he's actually significantly worse than the Weird Boy. I'm going to put him in bad choice. He's not as bad as Tank Bust, he's not as bad as the Planes. I'll put him behind the Buggies, because at least the Buggies have speed on their side. And finally, we have Mr. Crazy Hair himself, Zodgrod Wart Snagga, famous for shooting a mech through his own shock attack gun. This nutcase has this weird idea called positive reinforcements for his Gretchin, which lets him make super runts. And super runts is a really good special rule. It gives him and his runts, I can't talk. Him and his Gretchin scouts 9 inches, which is really useful because orcs traditionally only have really commandos that can do that. And then they have +1 to hit and wound, which isn't going to make Gretchin into some superstar damage dealer, but I think it does at least help them in at least contributing a little bit to the damage characteristics, right? Their Grot Blastas are effectively really bad las guns. But, I mean, at +1 to hit and wound, they'll actually be pretty effective against toughness 3 enemies, which will make them, kind of scary. And then they're still toughness 2, but subtracting 1 from the wound roll will at least make bolters less effective against them. And this guy's pretty cheap, and as I mentioned, load this guy up in a truck, and, well, you just have this big truck with a lot of toughness in it, leading the way from turn 1. Great way to get board control. I'm going to put this guy in strong. I don't think he's like auto-include insanity, but I think he has his place. So, that wraps up my thoughts on the orc units. Orcs in general probably aren't in the best position, but I'm going to be real. I make a lot of content on Space Marines, but I like orcs more than I like Space Marines. Orcs are my favorite faction. I love orcs, so I hope you guys enjoy that. I'm trying to include more orc content, not just for Orktober, but going forward in general. I've been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.